Good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We have returned from our summit community event that we had attended virtually last week. And I hope that all of you that were able to attend had an opportunity to visit all the different sessions that were supplied by all of the fellow exhibitors, and that you got some good takeaway information from those sessions. So we're kicking it back off this week with our very own Steve Waltz from Inovia Consulting. And Steve is going to be presenting on 5 ways to ensure your CRM is successful. And I just want to let you know that we are recording this webinar as well as all of our webinars. And you can see the recording in our on-demand webinar library for you to review again, or if you'd like to share it with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box, and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I'll pass it on over to Steve to kick off our presentation.
Well, thank you, Angie. Welcome, everybody. As Angie said, this session is called 5 Ways to Ensure Your CRM is Successful. I'm very excited about doing this presentation. Some of you have been on other presentations I've done. them on sales processes, done them on filling your pipeline. And what this one really is going to be a business discussion to help ensure that your CRM implementation will be successful or help it from where it's at. 2/3 of CRM implementations are considered failures. So we're not going to show any software. We will talk at the end a little bit about the capabilities of what the NAV and the BC has in it. And so if you're looking more to look at software, please reach out to your account manager at Inovia or myself, and we'll be more happy to get a little bit more detail about it. But as Angie said, my name is Steve Waltz, and I'm with the customer engagement team here at Inovia Consulting. A little about my background and why I'm doing this presentation. So I have been in the great field of sales for well over 30 years. I started my career in the automobile industry. I was there for several years. I went on to work for a large Fortune 50 pharma company where I spent about 25 years and retired. Did some consulting on the side, and I've been here at Inovia for over 5 years. And wore a lot of different hats. And probably the one I'm most proud of and enjoyed is that I've carried the bag. I've been a peddler. Okay, where the rubber hits the road, and have worked in different areas of the organization. So I've been a sales trainer, I've been involved in territory management, sales management, account management, cross-functional team, new product launches, marketing panels, sales leadership, and sales coaching. And I've worked with 3 different CRM platforms. And you know, when I put this together, it was kind of trying to look at all the views from all the different stakeholders. Okay. As a salesperson's viewpoint, as a sales manager's viewpoint, as a member of the leadership team, delivery team. And you know, the failure rate, like I said, is so high for CRM. And what I've done is I put together 5 ways that we can help ensure that you're going to be on the right side of those numbers. So we're going to talk about understanding that the number 1 priority for your CRM is to help the sales team close deals. And when I put that on there, it really resonates with some people, because I've had discussions with owners of companies and leadership team that's not their number 1 priority. They want to watch the activity of the sales team. And at the end of the day, you know, it's about selling product and service and closing deals. So we need to get focused on that. We'll talk a little bit more in depth on that. The next one is establish the sales cycle, or I have in plural, sales cycles, your sales process. Because a lot of times what happens is that a lot of companies don't have a sales process, or they have kind of a base knowledge of one. You know, hope is not a strategy. We need to understand what our sales cycle is. And depending on your organization, you might have multiple sales forces doing things differently. Maybe you have a hunter out there or maybe someone making 50 dials a day. You might have somebody that has more of a geographical area, maybe larger cities, or maybe you know, areas where there's accounts are more scattered. Maybe you have somebody that's more of an account management style where they're spending more time with fewer. And then maybe you have somebody that's more strategic type of a representative, and those cycles can be different. So we're going to talk about the importance of understanding, instead of trying to make everybody fit in a box of one sales cycle or process, to understand that you can have other sales processes. So the third thing we're going to talk about too is really understanding we want to build it from the ground up, reverse engineering. So a lot of times, you know, an owner or somebody from the C-suite goes and sees a seminar and sees that beautiful sales funnel. They're like, "Ooh, I want that." Well, that's great, and I understand that owners of companies want to see their sales funnel, or you know, people in operations want to use that to help, you know, for allocating resources and inventory. But really, if you want that data to be real, we have to build it for the salespeople. Okay, like I had earlier, the number one priority is to help the sales team close deals. We want to make it a safe place for them to want to put the deals in, so that pipeline is real. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is build it from the ground up. And it's funny, once you do that, everything else seems to go in place. The fourth item we're going to talk about is something that a lot of companies don't really like having conversations about, but we need to talk about the culture. Okay, is your CRM going to be for coaching or for compliance or for both? And mostly it should be for coaching. You need to have accountability. But for some reason, it does change, because depending on if you're not using CRM and you're considering it, or you're using it and it hasn't got launched, or wherever you're struggling with, if you have salespeople that have never really had to put their activities in, and now they're being timestamped, you know, Big Brother's watching. And if you think there's a shortage of talent in the ERP world, they said there's a shortage of 40,000 developers in this, in the United States alone. There's over a shortage of 250,000 professional salespeople. And if you have the top 10%, if you're fortunate enough to have a top 10 or 20% salesperson, you know, a lot of them don't like being challenged all the time, and Big Brother watching, and they can get a job anywhere. So we have to, you know, to walk a fine line on the coaching compliance, which we'll talk about. And lastly, and very importantly, is, you know, what metrics are you going to choose? What are you going to measure? And also understanding activities that you can control. You know, there's a book by Jason Jordan called Cracking the Sales Management Code. And there was over 300 metrics that companies would use for sales. And they realized during their research that, you know, the ones that were successful were the people that chose metrics they could actually control, and activities that could help them control it. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to really talk about, you know, why does CRM fail? Why is the failure rate about 2/3? So 2/3 on average of companies that have tried to implement CRM consider it a failure. We do ERP systems here at Innovia, and they say the failure rate of go lives on ERP systems is around 30%. So it is over double the failure rate for a contact management system, a customer relationship management system. Why is that? Because if you think about an ERP system, this runs the full functionality of your business, your distribution, your shipping, your manufacturing, your EDI, all these things. There's more things that could go wrong, but yet the failure rate is so much more on CRM. And the number one reason really is adoption. Because as I said on the previous slide, it needs to be built to help the salespeople close deals. And if you're just strictly building it in place of, because the leadership just wants to view things, it's not going to go well. You have to have ownership. And one of the reasons adoption is usually poor is that everybody tries to make it a one size fits all. Right? Here's one process. This is what we're going to follow. Do it all this way. Well, if you have different salespeople doing different tasks on your team, or different groups or people using it, and you try to stick them in that box, if they see no value of it, they're not going to do it. Okay, so we need to basically make it work, and we'll talk about how to get them engaged and involved with it, because it wasn't really designed for the sales team. It was designed for whatever reason, and we'll talk about the why. What's the why of going to CRM? And that's a great question. I usually ask, one of the first questions I usually ask somebody, why did you choose it? I want that pipeline. Well, great. Well, what do you want to achieve with it? Why do you want to invest this amount of money? How do you see it helping you get to your goals? So, the why needs to be clearly defined. And really, accountability. There's no pipeline reviews. Are you having a weekly pipeline review session? Are you having monthly? Are people being held accountable? And poor discovery and poor scope design really just, it's one of the few type of software where companies will try to implement it and not have a scope or a plan. They try to figure it out as they go. That is not a good strategy. So another thing I like to usually ask companies is, what type of organization are you? Are you a selling organization? And I am surprised. I don't have a number for it, but a lot of organizations I talked with, they think they are, but they're really not. Because a selling organization, okay, when I was with Abbott, okay, I was with if you ever read the book Good to Great, they met the criteria of being one of the top 7 companies. And the goal was, we are a selling organization. It is a total team effort. Now, there's an adage saying not everybody's a salesperson, but everybody is part of the sales team. Everyone wearing that logo on your shirt controls sales to a point, right? Because it doesn't matter if you sell something, you have great salespeople. If you can't deliver it on time, on budget, you can't support it, you can't bill for it correctly, customer support is not good. There's so many areas where a company that transact with customers can make mistakes or drop the ball. So to be a sales organization, we have to have that mindset of, through the customer's eyes, how are we doing? Silos need to be removed. And in building your CRM, it kind of coincides with that type of mindset, right? Because if you need to reach out to somebody in another department to help resolve a customer issue, then that should be removed, right? So cross-functional teams are very important. And it's also very important when you're putting a team together and doing your discovery for CRM. To be successful, to have that mindset of, through the customer's eyes, are we winning? That having that cross-functional team and people that are going to drive this are very important. And lastly, sales manager, the frontline sales managers, that's one of the hardest jobs of a company, right? Because what do sales managers do? They manage salespeople, right? And not only do they manage salespeople, they're also engaging with customers or prospects. And then they got to report back up to senior leadership. And, in the past, before they had CRM, they used to be like, okay, we had quarterly meetings. What's your goal? Okay, this is the number I'm going to hit. This is my plan. Maybe had a mid-quarter review. Are you on target? Yes. Well, now when you go to this new platform, everything is visible. So it can change how that is viewed upon, because here's sales reps supposedly putting all their activities in and their opportunities in, and sales managers making sure that's being done. But now they're answering questions about the activity of their team, and they never had to answer that before. So making sure that sales management is completely bought in to your implementation is vital. So let's get into the top 5 reasons that can help you understand and make your CRM successful. Number 1, without a doubt, is it needs to help your sales team close deals. So I get back to the, why do you want CRM? Well, I've had some owners and companies tell me they want to watch the activities of the sales team. It's important, and what's odd is that everybody kind of wants to know what the salespeople are doing. I never really had anybody call me say, I wonder what Sally's doing in accounting, or Jenny posts more transactions than Betty. You never really hear those type of conversations, okay? But what happens is that people kind of get too overly involved with, I noticed you only put a couple in this week and you put more in the week before. We need to be careful. So how can we build this, all right, out to help salespeople? And a fair question is it for the leadership team or is it for the sales team? It can be for both, but it should have the understanding is, how can this tool help my sales team, right, move deals down the pipeline and close them? And does your action support the why? A lot of companies don't have a plan on how to interact with the leadership level and their sales team, right? So if usually the VP of sales, whoever's on the leadership team, or if there's no one from the sales department on that, you need to have a plan on how you can communicate. And if it's always Big Brother watching, why are you doing this? How come you're not doing that? People want to know what to do versus being told what to do, right? You need to trust the talent that you hire and that they're doing their jobs. Because when you start kind of poking more than you should, it's almost questioning that a little bit, and people get more defensive. Okay, so we need to have a strategy in place to build this out to help sales teams move deals down the pipeline, and how we're going to communicate to them. It's vital. And this next slide right here is purely, in my mind, what it should be about. Okay, if you're a selling organization and you're fortunate to have top salespeople, this is how they think. And this is how we need to start thinking how to build it out. How am I going to create deals, advance them, and close them, right? That's the mindset of a sales hunter, of a true sales professional. How am I going to create deals within my current accounts, or how am I going to get new business? What's my plan to advance these all the way to either close or go on the next one, right? And you can kind of see here that the effort is the top of the funnel, which a lot of people don't like to do, right? And we need to fill the funnel with deals. And right now with COVID going on and with the, how economy can change in a heartbeat, when thin pipelines are exposed, more people pay attention to the deals in CRM, and we need to be careful. So we need to have the mindset of filling that pipeline. But also, you can see here the effort being involved. And every week and month, we need to ask ourselves as a salesperson, as a sales team and a leader, what new opportunities did we create from our proactive sales effort? That's the mindset we want to get when we're implementing this, okay? So number 2 is we need to define your sales cycle or your sales process, or plural, your processes. And that's not easy sometimes. I don't know what organization, as size your organization is. If you have one salesperson, 5, 10, I've worked with an organization that had thousands of salespeople, and people have different roles, okay? So what is your sales process? Well, that can be a question that can go in so many different directions, right? If you have maybe an inside person making dials, like maybe you have somebody making 50 calls a day. Well, that's, those transactions are different than somebody that's maybe out there managing accounts. Maybe you have an account manager that maybe has a list of accounts, or maybe you have somebody in the geography we were talking about earlier, and maybe you have more enterprise or larger, more complex deals that you maybe have a strategic person handling accounts. So maybe you have one account manager has 40 or 50 accounts. Maybe you have somebody that has 5 because they're massive accounts. So those sales processes could be different, okay? And you can have multiple sales cycles. Maybe you're acquiring new business, but maybe you have an offering for a small company or small offering. Maybe you have one for a larger one. So those processes will be different, right? Maybe you have one for your current customer base that maybe they're listed as a small customer, an A customer, B customer, whatever you want to list them at, but maybe you have more large, complex ones. So when we build out our CRM, we need to do the best we can to match it to the sales cycle. And we need to involve our sales team. And it means a couple things when you do that, right? Hopefully they're going to be open enough and your culture welcomes that. They're going to kind of tell you, well, I don't know about that. This is how it works in my area. This is kind of, how a typical process meets. Because really those conversations need to be. So when you meet somebody, all right, when do you create an opportunity, right? Every company has to make the decision. So after I meet you, or somebody in your sales reps in your company meet somebody and you have a conversation, if you decide to go to the next step, let's have maybe some people from our company, our stakeholders, talk with some of your stakeholders, have a little bit more of a discovery. I view that as an opportunity. Well, some companies don't. And we're going to talk about trying to get all those opportunities in the pipeline. But then you need to have a plan basically on, okay, once you get to there, and if you agreed upon and you find out there's a fit, how are we going to move that down the pipeline? Is there more stakeholders? Is there a deeper discussion? Is there a presentation? Is there a demo? We stage that out in our process in our CRM. And then maybe we get to a proposal. And now we're going to offer them, this is what we want to review, and we're going to win it or lose it. But that's where we got to get the input and whiteboard these things. That way when we build out our process, and we can even have that discussion on probability. Because that's also something that those are normally one-off conversations I have, is because as you move it down your sales pipeline, right, after a meet and greet, your sales closing rate is probably low. But as you go down each stage, and hopefully your salespeople are planning next steps, your win probability goes up. Now, it can be a win probability, or it can be a stage in the process. And those are discussions I like to have too, because everybody views it differently. Because if you think when you propose that you're at 70% win probability, there you go. But really, is it 70%? They're either going to say yes or no, or is it 70% of the process completed? So those are discussions we need to have internally. Number 3, okay, we need to build our CRM implementation from the ground up, reverse engineering it. And I know it sounds silly because a lot of people are like, especially if they're investing all that money, like, well, this is what I want. I want to do this, this, and this. Well, I understand. But it is interesting that when you make it to where the salespeople want to put the deals in and you build it from the ground up, all the other stuff just seems to happen. Because when you look at that sales funnel, what data are you looking at? The data that your sales team put in their opportunities, okay? And so if we have a culture where it's okay to lose deals and not be castrated on it, and we build it from the ground up to help us move these deals forward, more deals are going to get in, okay? And because people believe more what they see than what they hear. But I'm telling you, a lot of salespeople have deals they don't put in, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. But it's really about all the opportunities, okay? Because the opportunities are what create your pipeline, and you can build it. The discussion is, how do we build the opportunities? When is it an opportunity? Okay, and that's a discussion we even have here internally to make sure, okay, we want to put it in early, we want to put it in late. I think it benefits you when you find out that there's a fit and you think there's a chance to put that in, because if you're having pipeline review meetings, now you have other members of your team that can kind of hear and see what you're doing, and maybe they've worked with something in a similar situation and can offer up something to help you with that deal. Okay, and we also need to understand how much information is needed. So one of the questions I get asked is, Steve, my salespeople tell me, you want me selling or you want me putting stuff in CRM? Isn't it funny that the busiest people that are the people that always have time, they make time, versus the people that aren't that busy? Well, I couldn't get to it. It's been crazy. And what I'd like to say is that we need to have a discussion. But my mindset is, what I want information on the CRM, if let's say you made a sales call activity-wise, I call them the 3 things that you need. Who did you talk with? What did you talk to them about? And what's your next step? Okay. Now, if you're making a bunch of calls a day and it's not a complex sales, that can be I spoke with so-and-so, we talked about this, I have a follow-up call on this day. I get it. But if you're one of these strategic account managers and you have these large accounts, obviously that information can be more. Does it all go in CRM? Do you have a separate area where you keep your information? Those are things that should come out in the discussion. But how much information do you really need? I think those 3 things are imperative to when you put information in. But I think also, depending on what your roles with the company, you might need to put a lot more information in. So let's get into number 4, the tip number 4 I have. Coaching or compliance. And it can really challenge an organization, because a lot of salespeople never had Big Brother watching them. And there's a huge coaching opportunity when you implement CRM. But for some reason, it tends to be more of a compliance type of thing. Isn't it funny how the sales reps at 4:30 on Friday afternoon put all their activities in? Well, I want at least 10 sales calls in the CRM every week. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to put 10 sales calls in every week, and maybe they put them in on Friday. And actually, most of them are even real. But we need to have those conversations, because if we're truly building it to help them move deals, because the culture should be that we want to get those deals put in the pipeline, right? It needs to be a safe place for your sales team to want to put it in. They're not going to be every time they put a deal in. Let me tell you what happens. Organizations get so fixated on their win rate. Oh, we win 80% of our deals. What does that mean? That means the salespeople are just either so good they can go anywhere and get a job anywhere, or maybe they're waiting a little bit later than they should to put the deals in. Because I've seen it firsthand where people, especially if it's a large deal and they put it in early, all eyes are upon it. And then if you lose it, now you have to justify not only to your manager, but other members of the organization what happened. Well, wouldn't it be a lot nicer that if you're working that deal through your email or you're working that deal through your cell phone, and you're kind of like having meetings and you moved along and, oh, I'm going to win this one. All of a sudden you magically put this deal in 2 weeks before it closes and you're the hero. Okay. Well, that's why your closing rate is. So what do you want? Do you want all the deals in your CRM or just the ones that you're kind of telling your sales team by how what your culture's like, what they should do? Because, I'm telling you, I know in the pharma company, we put some big deals in there and people from other parts of the organization would come in. And there was really no plan for it. And that got kind of, it got a little tricky on that. So if you want a true pipeline, then losing deals shouldn't create an obstacle. Okay. Because if it magically drops from 80% to 50% closing rate, but you put in 3 times as many deals, there you go. Okay. No, I don't like losing deals. Most salespeople don't like losing deals, but we got to be careful, because what we want at the end of the day is the last thing I have down here. We want the deals that are in the sales team's mind to be in CRM. I mean, I talk about this quite a bit. I go to North America, I speak on it, and I still have probably a couple deals every time that probably should be in CRM, but are not. And I've spoke with people like, what do you think a ratio is of the deals that are in CRM versus the deals that aren't? And on average, I think it's 1 to 1 from what I've heard from a lot of people. And it's kind of scary, right? Because if I'm working it through Outlook and I know that if this one doesn't go through, I'm going to have people, kind of not write me about the deal, but, kind of just keep questioning me about it. Then I'm going to wait until a bit farther down the pipeline where my probability goes more. So we truly want to make it okay. You know what? We did the best we could. We got to go on the next one. All right. Number 5. This is where it can really get challenging and interesting for companies, is metrics and activities. Because we need to choose what metrics we want to measure. And I'm from the school that the only reason you want to measure something is because you want to prove it. And you also want visibility to it. Okay. So why would you want to measure something? In that book by Jason Jordan, there was over 300 metrics, and so many people were having these metrics that they really had no control over, and no one really cared. I mean, there's no reason for a sales manager or leadership team to have 20 reports on sales that are totally different metrics. We need to find things that, there's obviously things we want to know, but really, what are things we can measure? So we need to have a discussion on what we can and cannot control. Because one of the things that always comes up is that can you control revenue or market share, or can you control them, or can you influence them? You can influence them, right? I mean, if we say, hey, Kevin, I want you to go out there and give me another $500,000 of business in the next 2 weeks. Sure, I'll go out there and get it. I mean, you're kind of shooting darts. So we need to have an idea of how we choose our activities and how we execute. So what you can control and why this should matter. Very simply, you cannot control the revenue or the outcome of business results. You can influence it. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how to put together some plans on how to do that. So when we build out the CRM and our sales process, and like I said, if we're going to reverse engineer it to help the salespeople win and close deals, we have to kind of have a plan for them. Okay. So let's kind of get into some examples, okay, putting together their plan. So there's 3 things that we want to focus on, all right? What every company wants to know, the business result. How can we increase the revenue? Can we expand the market share, or how can we improve the customer experience? Those are what we want to achieve. So how are we going to do it? Most people skip the second thing I have here, the sales objective, and go right to number 3, the sales activity. All right, go make more sales calls. Well, that's great. What are we going to talk about? Well, that's where the objective comes in, all right? Because what you have here, these are the results you want to achieve. So what are things you can do, right? Maybe do you have a new product? Are you going to hunt for new customers? Maybe your close rate's down. Maybe you need some more training on that. Maybe customer service has been down, so your customer retention rate is low, or maybe your territory coverage needs to be reviewed. Those are things we can look at. And then the sales activity are what salespeople do. And these are things we have complete control over, right? Do we want to do product detailing? Do we want to get more specific on it? Maybe we want to have more call planning involved. Or maybe we're going to take, we're going to do more prospecting calls, do more sales hunting to fill the pipeline up, which can mean that if you're an account manager, you might have less time with some of your accounts. And then account planning, right? maybe I just really haven't been that strategic account manager, or maybe I just need to do more planning on that. And we'll talk about that. And then SMART goals, right? Strategic, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timestamp goals. And that can be another one-off conversation we can have with you. So let's do a couple examples of this. All right, samples of creating a plan. So we want to increase revenue. That's the business result, right? So one of the sales objectives that we have is adding new customers. So an activity would be increase the number of prospecting calls. Well, gosh, Steve, that was pretty simple. Well, it was pretty simple, but if you're taking somebody away from managing accounts to prospecting calls, that's an investment of time. Or another one might be is, well, we want to increase revenue by selling more in our current customer base. Maybe we have a new product, or maybe we have a complex product. Now, I was with the pharma company. We had some products that were in the ICU that were a little bit more intense, that needed was more planning, a longer sales cycle. So maybe more account planning and product training, right, where you would spend more time, on some products that maybe take longer. So when you meet with your customers or prospective customers, you have a plan and you're well versed in that product. So those are things you can do, and by having SMART goals and listing your barriers and things that can assist you on it is going to give you more of a strategic type of mindset. And so we're kind of winding down here. Those were the five ways you can improve your CRM. But what I get asked a lot is, processes. What are the sales processes, Steve? And I have here code, right? If I like showing this slide. My wife likes Donny Osmond, and this is from the Joseph and the Technicolor Dream Code. He had the code of many colors, right? And they were able to break down the research on these are really your 4 sales processes of CRM, and it spells COPE: call management, opportunity management, account management, and territory management. And it's something that if you've been a salesperson or a sales manager, you get this. And if you're outside the organization of the sales team, then you kind of understand it. But to get a little bit more organic on what I mean, so call management is what salespeople do. You manage your sales call. All right, and these are things that you can train upon when you're having these discussions, setting up if you're building it for the salespeople, right, is what salespeople do. They make calls. Well, there's pre-call planning involved. Only half the salespeople do pre-call planning. So the CRM is so important. You can go back and look at the history of what you talked about. Maybe you had something you promised them, you follow up with. And then the next part is you make the call. It's what salespeople do. Well, then the last part is what you disseminate the call and put your notes in. That's the one where, hey, you want me selling or you want me putting stuff in CRM? Well, it's so important to put some notes in there so it can help you manage that sales call. Well, now we get into opportunity management. And, opportunity management is really to help sellers pursue and close more deals. Okay, especially if a complex multi-stage deals. So we need to understand what the buying process is for the customer. We need to understand what maybe our competitors are in there. What approach are we going to take to win in this account? Okay, this opportunity. So, you can have multiple opportunities, which lead to really what your account management is. Do you have strategic account planning? So do you know all the stakeholders, right? As a territory manager, account manager, or whatever your role is, you're in charge of engagement and you're in charge of the long-term relationship with these customers, okay? And there can be a multitude of opportunities within this one. So how do you raise up, like pull yourself out like an eagle rising above into the clouds and looking down and say, I think there's an opportunity for this year, an opportunity next year for this. This is my plan to achieve it. These are my goals. These are my activities. And then you can see how that builds into how you can utilize your CRM. Okay, you can start putting activities in. And a question you can have when you're doing discovery is that how far out do you want to go? I actually have opportunities that are 2-3 years out, just a few of them. But I know they're out there, and I want to have visibility of it. But also, what dollar amount do you put on that, or when you're doing forecasting? So these are conversations. And the last process I have here is territory management. So really, salespeople are the CEO of their territory, right? And then the sales manager and the leadership team is kind of what the board of directors, because you have to own your territory. And so you need to define what accounts are what. Is it A account? Is it a B account? Maybe you have 40 accounts. What are my top 5 accounts? Okay, out of my top 5 accounts, what are my opportunities in that? Which ones should I spend the amount of time to have my strategic account planning and make my account plans for? And you can see how that works from bottom to top and top to bottom. But you notice how I reverse engineered it? I started at the call level and worked down. So at the end of the day, these are the 4 sales processes. So I just kind of want to do a quick summary. One of the things that when people purchase CRM is that they almost think it sometimes can be an additional salesperson, and it's not. CRM is a tool for all the stakeholders. It's different for the salesperson, different for the sales manager, different for the leadership team operations. They use it differently. And a question I get asked, okay, in my Microsoft Dynamics NAV or Business Central, what do I have capability-wise? Well, you have the things we kind of talked about, the to-dos and your task and your opportunities, and your sales cycles within your opportunities. You can even do marketing campaigns. And that sales funnel, which is fueled by your opportunities, is all in your NAV and BC. And lastly, I think one thing I want to leave you with too is that it's not a zero-sum game. If you're fortunate enough to have a good implementation, you need to have a plan for training and questions afterwards, right? Because you're going to realize as you go through it, maybe we need to adjust this process. And it gives you an opportunity for sales training, which a lot of companies really don't have it. Is what we kind of talked about, how to, do you have that hunting mindset? Are your account managers strategic in their thinking? And you're going to have questions after implementation. So I think you need to either have a consultant, a partner, or somebody to kind of help you through to bounce off ideas. So Angie, I think I wrapped up that, and I wanted to open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Steve. We do have a couple questions that came through.
Okay.
Do you have a preference on what CRM platform, like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, for sales?
That's a good question. And with the failure rate, I usually tell people it's not really your consultant. It's not usually the platform that you're using. It's really kind of what we kind of talked about. So I've worked with Salesforce, and I currently work with Dynamics CRM. Are there benefits and differences? I would say there are, but do I have a preference? No, I don't. I think they're both good solutions. And actually, the relationship management inside your NAV and Business Central is well, first off, it's free. So if you're not using your current CRM, if you're not using any CRM, that might be a good starting point just to kind of get a feel for it. But no, I really don't have a preference on one or the other.
Okay, thank you. And the next question was, are salespeople put in their data at the end of the week most of the time? What do you recommend?
That's yes. It's funny how we kind of get in that compliance discussion, right? And it's funny how I noticed that you put all your calls at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and it's human nature. And I think a lot of times if you kind of build it from the ground up, and the salespeople had it, and they view it as a tool, we want to make it to where when they turn on their computer in the morning, they want to go to their CRM and see their activities for the day and what opportunities they have. Okay, we want to make it almost like their cell phone, right, where they can't live without it. And so when you do that, they tend to put the data in daily, or people travel. I get it, but when I've been with a company where it was required that by 5 o'clock Friday, your activities need to be in. So if it truly inhibits them from their job, then that's a discussion. If it's not a big deal, depending on what you have, ideally you want to strive for and have that coaching conversation. Look, by having this information in sooner, that's our customer. Maybe we can help. There's notes in there that if somebody else has to step in, it will help them. But the goal is to get it in, because at the end of the day, it's about selling. Okay. And I remember talking with a sales manager, where they had a guy that sold 3 times more than the next guy, but just kind of put stuff in more ad hoc, didn't have a process for it, and was so fixated on him that he wanted to fire the guy. And I'm like, okay, this guy sells 3 times more than the next guy. why would you want to fire her? Maybe you need to have a conversation. Maybe you can help them put the data in, because at the end of the day, it is about winning sales. So I guess the answer to that question is, you have to determine internally what best fits for you. But my goal is hopefully get them in 24 to 48 hours afterwards, unless you're traveling. Great. Any other questions?
Great, thank you, Steve. No other questions have come through. If anybody has anything that you want to address with Steve, now is the time to get those in so that he can address them.
There's my contact information. Please reach out to myself or your account manager, and I'll be more than happy to have a deeper discussion if needed.
All right, well, thank you, Steve, for presenting today, and thank you to everyone who is on our webinar, or if you're watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And we just want to let you know that we do have more webinars coming soon. Next week, we have Naveen Reddy from Dynamic eShop, and Naveen will be presenting on See Why Dynamics eShop's all-in-one e-commerce solution is better than ever. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's anovia.com/events. We're always updating that with new information for you. And have you heard our podcast yet? One of our hosts, Steve Waltz, he is doing the Inovia Conversation with Jeff Pergolski. And so we just want to encourage you to listen to the selection that they have provided to us. And you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page. And that's anovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, well, we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on another Inovia webinar. Have a great week, everyone.